Hi, I'm Alicia May, and this is Experience CTN, where we're going to learn more about CTN volunteers and producers who have supported community media over the past years. Today I'm here with Jim Novak, who has been a community producer since 1996, and he's also a songwriter. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Alicia. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I want to know more about Songwriters Open Mic. That's like the big show that you produce.
Right, that's been going on for a little over 20 years, and I videotape songwriters playing original music, typically in a music store here in Ann Arbor after hours. And we tape that, I edit it into half-hour segments for CTN. And it's been going on for 20 years. I started with the idea that it might be fun to videotape performers, including myself, so we could critique one another. You know, like, oh, you're not standing up straight, or you're not facing the audience properly, or something. Or you could go back and listen to your song and say, okay, here's how I delivered that lyric, or here's where I screwed up that chord change. So I did that, and after a couple of months of taping these open mics and looking at them, I thought, I could put this on public access TV, because I knew about your station, and I knew the kinds of material that worked there, and I thought, well, I'll just bring this over to CTN and see what happens.
Right, what a great segue.
And that was 20 years ago.
Right, and here we are now.
Yeah.
How did you hear about CTN then?
Well, my experience with CTN actually goes back a bunch more years. My first show that I was involved in for CTN was in the late 1970s. I'm not even exactly sure what year it was. I was a graduate student. I had some friends who were jazz musicians and some friends who were dancers. And we had one sax player and one modern dancer did a specially produced sort of music and choreography that we shot above the old fire station where CTN was first headquartered. And that was my first show.
Yeah.
So I kind of produced it. It was in the studio. I didn't have to own any of the equipment, which of course was one of the great attractions, right? You don't have to own wonderful equipment, professional grade equipment to do great shows here.
Right, definitely. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because our records didn't even go back that far because it was all written at that time and never got imported to digital.
It wasn't cuneiform tablet hacked.
Right, yeah. So let's go back to songwriters.
Sure.
You have produced over 1,000 shows, and you produce a show weekly. That's one show for 1,000 weeks.
Been on the air for 1,000 straight weeks. And I tape shows in Ann Arbor, as I say, at the music store after hours. Occasionally, I will go and do what I call Songwriters Open Mic on the road. I just got back last week from Harbor Springs.
Oh, very cool.
And I taped what will probably turn out to be about a dozen episodes. And it was at a songwriters retreat, a very interesting experience. With some professional songwriters serving as staff and instructors, and about 40 songwriters from all over Michigan.
Fascinating. And
we have an open mic every night of the retreat, and I was allowed to tape that.
Wow.
And then I'll be editing that for like I say, at least a dozen shows.
Right, so you're kind of a one-man show. You tape it, right, and then you edit it. You do it all yourself.
I do, although that reminds me of another story about this long 20-year history. When I first started, I did the shooting by myself. That's true, but editing at that time was not done on computers in 1996. Well, maybe it was, but I didn't have access to that.
Right.
What I did have access to was a university TV studio that I could use kind of on the weekends and on Sunday afternoons and that sort of thing, and I did. That reel-to-reel kind of editing, what's that called? Non-linear?
Yeah, non-linear editing.
Non-linear editing.
Old school.
Very old school. And so you run a VHS tape on one deck and on the other, and you create this new thing. And so that was VHS tapes, and I would dutifully bring them to CTN every week. And so my first shows were that. I don't remember particularly what year it was, but certainly more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I got an iMac, and I started using iMovie, and then was editing in that way.
So that's non-linear.
That's
I'm sorry,
non-linear.
correct. You were editing as linear.
Oh, okay.
Wow. That
shows you how much I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that was, that's what I was doing. And so that was, you had to have some pretty expensive equipment in those days.
Right.
And because I had access to it through a university, doing it sort of in odd times, that's how I got my start. But as soon as I could, I realized that, you know, I can do this on a laptop with iMovie software. So it's not Final Cut Pro that you use. It's not the sort of elaborate stuff. But if you're cranking out a show as often as I do, I kind of try to keep it as simple as I can.
And when you were creating these 1,000 shows, you were also working full-time, so I completely understand that.
Yeah.
And now before the show, you just told me you were retired, which is great.
I have retired, yep. I'm
Yeah.
a retired college professor, and when I went up to the open mic this year, I did not have to take my teaching materials. I didn't set up meetings with students over Skype or anything. I was on my own.
Right.
It's great.
So we have a clip of someone performing at the open mic night, and it's just what it sounds like, right? Anyone can show up and share their work?
It's very democratic. I mean, there's no like bar to entry. Anybody who's willing to perform for others and be videotaped, I always ask people if they wish to be. But if they pass muster in that regard, they're on.
Great. Well, let's take a look.
Okay.
Remember you that way. Remember you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
So we just watched a short snippet of it, but that gentleman performed those 3 songs before that. So it's kind of like perform as you go, as much as you want, or do you limit it?
It's a typical situation is a set of 3 songs or 15 minutes, and I record the whole thing. I encourage people to talk about their song, either before playing it or after, sort of how it came to be written, what they were trying to accomplish musically or lyrically. If it's an older song, how it might have changed or evolved over time. All of those things, and I tend to leave those in the show because this is songwriters not only performing but also talking about their music. That's Tim Rehard. He goes back to the late 90s. He did have a period in which he wasn't coming to the open mic regularly, but he has been, and he started, as I say, back in the 90s. One of the nice things about this show is that, you know, he's become a buddy, and he does certain things on guitar that I don't have a clue how to do. So it's great fun, and it's true, and this is magnified over a lot of other musicians. You talk to other musicians, you get an idea about, oh, how does he play a particular song? What kind of voicing is he using? What kinds of keys does he use? In Tim's case, he alters the tunings on the strings. He does not use standard tuning on the 6 strings of the guitar.
Interesting.
And so it's fun to find somebody who knows something you don't know.
Right.
And to take it from there.
Yeah, and we also have a clip of you performing.
Okay.
We talked about how you're a songwriter. Do you want to say anything before? Like, how long have you been performing? Where did you start? Things like that?
Oh, sure. Well, I got my first guitar when I was 16, and the Beatles were all the rage. Although it was an acoustic guitar, because I was also interested in folk singers. Gordon Lightfoot, Bob Dylan. These were heroes to me, people that you know, I've seen any number of times. So I had this guitar, and I played it, and I wrote songs in high school, but I didn't really come out of the closet as a performer until probably until I was 40 or so. I mean, I rarely performed in public until then. But right around that time, I started hosting this open mic, and so it's out there now.
Wonderful. Let's take a look.
Okay. This song that I want to do now is called Atlas, How Have You Been? And it's the lyrics are from a poem by Carl Sandburg. And the lyrics happen not to rhyme. And so for me, I thought the writing issue was how can I sort of convey the idea that things are going to progress in a way that you'll recognize without necessarily doing C, F, and G. Because usually the C, F, and G progressions have the rhymes in those certain places. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to break that expectation. So what's the other way to create some sort of expectation? And Paul is smiling. He knows that the answer, among others, is a bass line, right? so theoretically, what's happening is that bass line kind of carries you through and creates the expectation that, hey, that must be a song. And I'm not paying any attention to the C, F, and G or the 1, 4, and 5 stuff. I'm just doing the bass lines.
What's it like being up there on stage?
Well, you know, it's a very comfortable situation there. Well, at least it is for me now. But some people have said to me that they think it's awfully close. I mean, it's a very small little space, and you're sort of only a few feet away from the audience. But it's a very accepting kind of environment. Almost everybody there are songwriters or friends that they've brought along to sit in the audience. So you have an incredibly attentive audience, which generally is fun. It doesn't make you nervous. It's sort of a relief, because a lot of times playing in coffee houses or other places, you're never really sure if you're being heard over the sound of the beans being ground or
the typing on the
foam
keyboard.
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So where is Songwriters and when is it? How can people get involved?
Okay, now the regular Ann Arbor taping is the first Tuesday of every month at 7:30 at a music store called Oz's Music on Packard. So it's really not very far from here, from CTN, near the corner of Packard and Stadium.
Wonderful.
And it's 7:30 on the first Tuesday, and songwriters can do 3 original songs or 15 minutes. The typical thing is solo performers, but we have been able to accommodate groups. Yeah. And typically it's acoustic performers, but we have been able to accommodate people who need to plug in.
Good to know. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So I want to present you with this award, Jim, for a Lifetime Achievement Certificate.
Lifetime Achievement. Well, wait a minute.
Achievement. I am just honored that you have continued to do this for 20 years plus 1,000 shows. That to me is incredible.
Well, thanks, Alicia May. This is really very nice.
Yeah,
really nice.
Let's put it up on here so the viewers can see it. And I just want to know, are you going to continue now that you're retired? Is it going to be 2,000 soon?
It won't be soon. That I can guarantee you, because I think we're at 1,040 or something right now.
Right.
But I never set a goal as to like 1,000 shows. The goal I was interested in was sort of reaching out to local and regional songwriters, trying to do as interesting a show visually and acoustically as possible. So over the years, I think the audio quality has been good, but gotten better. I think the video quality, not too many bells and whistles in terms of the production. But my goal is to keep on doing it, because without any number in mind, but just that it's still fun.
Yeah.
There are many times on those first Tuesdays when I'm there at Oz's Music and I'm standing in the back of the room behind the camera, and I'm thinking, that guy's really good, or that woman just knocked me out. And I'm thinking, that's why I do this. Mm-hmm. I'm still really enjoying the music, because songwriters, I think, get a lot of forward momentum from watching and listening to other songwriters.
Yeah.
And so not necessarily going to a Gordon Lightfoot concert or going to a Dylan concert and seeing this polished situation, but seeing people who are working things through. Maybe it's a brand new song, they'll kind of introduce it and say, I'm still scratching my head about what to do in the second verse of this song,
right,
or something along those lines. So you get a boost, I think, from seeing how someone has handled a theme in terms of the lyrics, maybe how they've handled the music and done something that will make you think, I like that, and in the best sense of the word, I'm going to try to imitate it.
Right.
I'm going to see what it can do for me.
Yeah. So 20 years of this, over 1,000 shows. I mean, we've talked about a lot of memories that you've had. Do you have a favorite memory during Songwriters, or maybe not during a production, but after someone said something to you? Well,
there's one thing that, being here at CTN and sort of loving this environment and the people who work here and produce shows here, I remember that it was a CTN staffer, or maybe multiple staffers, who encouraged me to attend the Alliance for Community Media, the regional meeting. This was well over 10 years ago. But it opened up to me the sort of big picture of community media, that it's about community engagement, that this is happening across the country, that it exists on levels not only in terms of arts and culture stuff that I'm doing, but also educational things, and government programming. I met a bunch of producers from around the Midwest. It also allowed me to make some contacts for other stations. As you know, the Songwriters Open Mic show is screened every week on Grand Rapids public access media. There were some years when the show was also seen up in Indian River, which was the headquarters for that whole northern part of the Lower Peninsula. Petoskey and Mackinac City and Indian River and all those places.
Wow.
They showed the program for a long time. But one of the lessons here, I suppose, is that the station, the public access station, no longer exists. They had funding issues. I think it's really important for people to realize that a place like CTN is sort of a treasure, a local treasure, but it won't necessarily stay here. There are times when sort of advocacy on behalf of the whole idea of public media is really going to be important to people if we want to keep this up and stay away from you know, the entirely commercially driven, money-driven, big numbers-driven media that otherwise is out there. That was my first interest, was it was an alternative way to get stuff that I was interested in front of other people for their entertainment, if nothing else. Yeah.
And to highlight and spotlight local people, right? Local information, local entertainment, and that's what you do.
Right, hundreds. I mean, one of these days I need to figure out how to count them, or find somebody who'd love it as a project. But I have a list of everybody who's ever signed in for 20 years plus, and every show I have a list of who performed and what song they performed on every show.
Wow.
So it's doable to count it up, but suffice it to say there are hundreds of local and regional musicians who have played. And occasionally when I've gone out on the road and taped in Traverse City and Mackinac, other places, sometimes I've run into people who are people who have like a dozen CDs out there. They're touring musicians, and they say, "Oh, public access, sure, why not?"
Right.
So there are a lot of people who are local and regional, but there are also folks who have serious reputations who have also played on the program.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we're running out of time. Our last question is, why do you think people should support community media? You already talked about it.
I did a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to think about television as an educational and entertainment resource that is much broader than what is brought to us by people who are selling us products and who are looking for the greatest numbers they can get. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think something like public television can be great, and in many ways this is sort of, with HBO and so forth, this is kind of a golden Netflix, this is a golden age of TV.
Right.
But I still think there is plenty of room for and plenty of need for the kind of local opportunity for people to say, this is the stuff that interests me in terms of my city and government, or this is the stuff that entertains me, this is the stuff that I enjoy creating. And I'm just glad that CTN is there for Ann Arborites.
Well, I'm glad you're here and that you continue to produce content, and I'm still blown away. 20 years, over 1,000 shows. Jim, congratulations.
Thanks, Alicia May. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, and I can't wait to see where you go from here.
Great.
So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more on Experience CTN. In the meantime, why not come in and experience CTN for yourself? Email ctn@a2gov.org for more information, and to watch other CTN programs, visit us online at a2gov.org/watchctn. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTN Ann Arbor. I want to thank our crew, Matthew Drake, Jason Broniak, Kelsey Taylor, Robert Horn, Justin Wright, Phil Booz, and Rich Musso. And I'm Alicia May, your host. We'll see you next time on Experience CTN.